Primeval Titan banned? I'm pretty sure he is. Yep, he is. Damn it! Why am I even making this deck? Oh, hi. DreadBC here. Just wanted to record another video for a recent commander deck that I created. I had this when I pulled it out of a pack in Battle for Zendikar and immediately said I really, really want to build a deck around this, and it's been years, and I just recently got him out and started throwing the stuff together. It's a semi-budget, semi-not-budget deck. I've got a few cards in there that are going to set you back a few dollars if you actually buy them outright. But so far as expensive decks go, this is not going to be one of them. So there are many budget options for it, but I swear the only thing that this deck needs to really just go insane is a little bit of card draw and a little bit of land. And just Omnath himself gets in there and does the work. So let's go ahead and take a look at the lands for the deck, and I will be right back. So, the difference between Omnath and most other generals is Omnath's biggest support is going to come from his landfall triggers. Now, obviously, there are other cards that are going to make that significantly better, and we're going to go over some of the ones that I've selected, but this deck is land heavy. The number isn't heavy, but the way to get lands out is super heavy. So we're going to start out with our basics anyway, because every good budget deck has to have a buttload of basics. We're going to start with 12 forests. You don't have to count them because I'm pretty sure they didn't all just fit in the screen. And slightly fewer at 10 mountains. You need to have a bunch, and you'll see in the spells just why. It'll make a lot more sense, of course, when you start seeing those. There are tons of red-green lands that you can play, but we're only going to play a select few because you don't need them. A lot of the ones that I've chosen that can get both colors, I've chosen specifically because they help with landfall triggers. This one, everyone knows, Evolving Wilds, which is the younger version of Terramorphic Expanse. Both of these put a basic land into play tapped, but they put two lands into play. You play Omnath, then you play one of these after he comes into play, and you get two 5/5 elementals. Those elementals are beefed up by his abilities, so when they die, they can then lightning bolt something. So the more lands that you get out once he's in play, the better. Likewise, the Gruul Turf here bounces a land back to your hand. That's two more landfall triggers. Terrain Generator is it's kind of neat actually. I like this one early on and I like it late game too once you get your card draw going. It's colorless, so it doesn't fix your mana, but you don't need it. You've got two colors and so many ways to fix it anyway. But it allows you to put a basic land card from your hand into play tapped, and it does this at instant speed. Kind of a neat little trick that you can do. And obviously, if this is in play, it's not going to be a huge trick. People are going to see it coming. But it's still one that I have used on a number of occasions to change the way the board looks, enough to save me a significant amount of damage. Terminal Moraine, it's a colorless land that you can pay to and essentially rampant growth, but you have to sacrifice this to do so. Sack it, put a basic land card into play tapped. It's very simple, but it's a double landfall trigger, so I had to put it in here. A newer version of that one, which is actually twice as effective as that. This one you tap 3 and a green and sack it, and you get two basic lands that come into play tapped. It's a triple landfall trigger. So we're going to get into our utility lands. When you're running a bunch of mountains, you might as well go ahead and run a Valakut. If you want to go a heavier mountain route with this, it's totally fine. My deck is super duper green heavy, so I couldn't put that many more in. This is not going to be a win condition. Like I said, it's semi-budget. I didn't feel like forking out the money for a scape shift to make this just a one-shot to kill somebody, but that's okay. Oran Reef the Vastwood. I put this in there because I thought making a bunch of 5/5s for free just wasn't quite good enough. I wanted them to be 6/6s. Dryad Arbor, it's not a basic land, but it is a forest, and it is a green creature. So Green Sun Zenith can get it for just 1 mana. Other than that, there's plenty of reasons that you'll want cheap and easy access creatures that you don't really care about later in the game, and we'll go over those. Raging Ravine. Seen significant number of decks online that run Omnath that don't run this, but if you'll notice when you activate it, it becomes an elemental. So if it dies, it still triggers his second ability. Guessing Wolf Run, because I'm running red-green, there's no reason not to. And like I said, we get tons and tons of mana out, so this can end up beefing up one of your little guys to just wreck somebody's Planeswalker or go straight to their face. And yeah, great utility land, no reason not to run it. And the rest are just the lands that tap for both colors. Rootbound Crag, Cinder Glade, which is of course another mountain, Grove of the Burn Willows, Kazandu Refuge for when you get just a little bit behind in life, and the strictly worse version, Shivan Oasis, and the one that I'm not sold on yet, Fungal Reaches. Now, I just saved this one for last arbitrarily, but I don't care for storage lands in this one much because we can't abuse them all that well. We don't have any proliferate and no ways to just charge up on one counters, but there's no reason not to run it, I suppose. If you get the original Omnath, the one that's mono green, you can just use his ability every turn or so to put counters on this thing. It's like I say, it's not a huge liability since we've got such good fixing, so it's really up to you if you want to run it. And from here, I think we're going to move on to artifacts. This deck runs a very small artifact package, but all of them have a pretty good reason to be running here. Obviously, I'm not just going to run junk, but I didn't want to put a lot in there because artifact hate is becoming much more prevalent, especially with the new sets coming out. The returning artifacts to their owner's hands is kind of common, and while it won't set you back hugely in this, they're kind of a liability if you rely on them too much. So we're just going to run some simple ones. We've got Explorer's Scope. It allows you to get lands off the top of your library so you don't have to draw them. Lightning Greaves. Every commander deck that runs a little bit of aggro should have Lightning Greaves in there. It's a great card. Sword of the Animist, one of the newer ones that have come in here, really, really good. This should go. I'm sold on this being in every deck that runs more than 3 basic lands. The +1/+1 is negligible for the most part. Getting a rampant growth every time you attack is absurd in this deck. Ashnod's Altar. Just recently picked this one up because, as it turns out, sacrificing a creature in this deck doesn't necessarily just add 2 mana to your mana pool. In this case, it's 2 mana and a lightning bolt, so keep that in mind if someone decides to board wipe. Just sack everything to Ashnod's Altar and dome them for 30 damage. And another new one that I've not actually tested yet, but I really like the diplomacy play this one has. Gyruper Orrery. Good God, that's a tough one. Each player may play an additional land on his or her turns, so diplomacy. Everyone gets something special out of it. And at the beginning of each player's upkeep, if that player has no cards in hand, they draw 3 cards. Okay, so that's good, yes, but at the same time, you know, it's not one of those ones that's going to get destroyed since it helps everybody, but it's probably going to help you more, especially if you just empty your hand out every turn, which is not impossible given that we can put multiple lands into play in this deck. So if you draw 2 lands with it, you can still probably play them both, and then you can play the spell as well, draw 3 at the end of turn. Really good. I can't wait to see how this thing works out. We're going to move on to sorceries now. Alright, Collective Voyage is our first sorcery. It's good early game, it's good in the middle of the game, it's good late game. At the beginning of the game, it can help you get things moving a little bit faster. It does help everybody else, so a lot of people will want to keep you, or will want to pay into it and get a little bit of extra out of it. In the mid game, it's possibly still going to help everybody, but in the late game, a lot of decks don't run a lot of basics, so therefore it's not going to actually help them that much. But with you, even if you just get 5 lands, that's 25 power and toughness. And if you've got a Valakut in play, that could very well be a giant damage swing towards someone else. I like this card. I'm not 100% sold on it though. If you want to replace it with something else, you're definitely welcome to. I actually might try other things in its place. I've just got to come up with something a little bit better first. Sylvan Scrying, search your library for a land card, not a basic land card. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Pretty simple. Go get a land, usually something like Valakut, or if you're starved for a red mana, then you can go get just a mountain or whatever it needs to be. But this one gets non-basic, so it's one of the few that does that. Hull Breach, choose one, destroy target artifact, or destroy target enchantment, or do both. Great card in EDH. Commander, you almost always have multiple targets for it. Life's Legacy, one of the newer cards that I actually ordered specifically for this deck because it's dirt cheap. As an additional cost, sack a creature, draw cards equal to the sack creature's power. Usually you're just going to sack one of your elemental tokens, and draw 5 cards for 2 mana. Love this card. Not to mention the artwork's kind of neat. Explorer lets you play an additional land during your turn, and if it's great on turn 2 because it puts another land into play possibly. It's great on turn 12 because it at the very least is just going to draw you another card. Even if it's a dead draw, you can get something else for it. Search for Tomorrow. I like the suspend on this one, although I've never actually suspended it. This one's a rampant growth that puts puts a basic land card into play, not tapped. So that's got a little bit of a bonus to it. Harmonize. Very straightforward. Draw 3 cards. Card draw is at a premium in this deck. I do rather like that green has started to get more card draw, and I think this might have been. I think it was my friend Trey who said that Harmonize seemed to really push the green card draw up and off the charts, and that's when Wizards of the Coast started to realize how necessary it was. Peregrination. This is literally 2 rampant growths, plus you get to scry 1. So for 4 mana, you get 2 basic land cards into play tapped, and then you get to determine whether or not you want to draw your next card. Triumph of the Hordes, I'm just going in converted mana cost order. This is more of a game ender than anything. If you've got 3 or 4 of your elementals out, giving them infect is just, it's most likely going to kill at least 1 person, probably 2. Shamanic Revelation, another fairly new one. Draw a card for each creature you control, and the ferocious ability, you gain 4 life for each creature with power 4 or greater. Every one of those elementals is a 5/5. You're going to draw a card for it and gain 4 life. This is a huge swing. Love this card in this deck. Nissa's Renewal, also one of the ones from Battle for Zendikar. Search your library for up to 3 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then you gain 7 life. So the life, it's 3 times the cost of Rampant Growth. You get 3 basic land cards, but with this one you also get 7 life. Desert Twister, a long-forgotten green card, destroy target permanent. This was printed way before Planeswalkers were in the game, and yet it can still destroy the Planeswalkers. Now we've got our X-spells. Got Hurricane. This is one of the ones that can be a sweep, except this one only hits flyers, but that's okay because it can be more one-sided. If someone's running a bunch of angels, you're killing all the angels that don't have protection from green, and you're hitting players as well. It's another one that you can use to end the game. Likewise, we've got Savage Twister, but because you're adding the red, it adds the Earthquake effect, so it's each creature, period. You're hitting flyers and land creatures. Now, if you do this for 4, all of your elementals are going to survive, except for the ones that are not generated by Omnath, but we'll get to those here in a minute. And the last of the X-spells, I mentioned it earlier, was Green Sun Zenith. Play it for 1, go search a Dryad Arbor. Play it for 7, go get an Avenger of Zendikar. It's good. My favorite cards are good no matter when you draw them, and this is another one of those. Next up, we've got some real beaters for this deck. We've got the enchantments. They carry the game for you. Let's take a look. So, enchantments. These really drive this deck into new, just atmospheric heights of power. And for the most part, they're all dirt cheap. So we've got Colony Heart Expedition. Good early game, good mid game, good late game. Love to see cards like that, as I mentioned before. Early game, you use it to ramp into your Omnath faster. Late game, you use it as a way to generate more tokens at instant speed. If someone attacks and forgets it's there, you sacrifice it when they think you're tapped out. You just generated 2 5/5 blockers. Elemental Bond is a house in this deck. It can carry you to a victory by itself. Whenever a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. That means when a land comes into play, if Omnath is in play, you're generating a 5/5 and drawing a card. You play a ramp spell, you put a land into play, you draw a card. You play a creature in this deck. A lot of them are huge. You draw a card. You're just replacing stuff in your hand. As I said, draw spells in green are just amazing, and especially good when you've got such power level as this stuff. Rites of Flourishing. This is another one of the diplomacy cards. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws a card. Then each player may play an additional land. The one drawback to this is you don't get to use it the turn it comes into play, because so far as I know, I don't believe there's a way to flash anything into this in this deck. If someone else allows you to do it, you know, that's very rare that that would happen, but I suppose that would help. But usually it's just going to be the next player draws the extra card first. If they decide to destroy it, so be it. You haven't lost a whole lot. Fires of Yavimaya really, really helps when you just get explosive draws, put a whole bunch of lands into play with your Omnath in one turn. They all have haste now. I've never used it to sacrifice to give something +2/+2 because when your creatures are already 5/5s, that 2/2 is, you know, not very big. Pattern of Rebirth. You put this on any creature you want to, and when that creature dies, search your library for a creature card, put it directly into play. You put it on an elemental that means nothing to you. You either sacrifice it to your artifact, your Ashnod's altar, or you just chump block with something, or you sacrifice it to one of your draw spells. It's so many things that you can do to get a creature to die on your terms makes this card great, because then you go search for something that's even meaner and put it into play. Seed the land, it turns every land into yet another token. Tokens are very important, even though these are 1/1s. Tokens are very important in this deck because of a couple of other cards that use them. The sacrificing for Ashnod's Altar is one. Skull Mulcher is another. We'll see that in just a minute. But that's one that generates 1/1s. This one generates 2/2s. They are, however, elementals, so it's even better with Omnath's, you know, a little bit more synergy with Omnath on this one. Perilous Forays, sacrifice it, pay 1, sacrifice a creature, search your library for a land card, I'm sorry, for a basic land card, put it into play tapped. You can see where this goes. You pay a mana, you sacrifice one of your tokens, you put a basic land into play, you get a token. You pay a mana, sack the token, put one into play, you get a token. If you have multiples of these out, you're getting multiple tokens for each time you do this. Love to see this card. It allows board sweeps to actually work in your favor, because if those creatures are going to die anyway, sack them, get a land. Now, if the creature you're sacrificing is an elemental, again, Omnath Lightning Bolt ability is going to trigger. These next two are my favorite to see. Whenever a creature, we got where Ancients Tread. Whenever a creature power 5 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, where Ancients Tread deals 5 damage to target creature or player. Play a big multiple land ramp spell. 3 lands come into play. That's 15 damage to someone's face, or 15 damage to one of their giant creatures. And it's almost twin Warstorm Surge. This one is not conditional, but it does cost 1 mana more. Any creature enters the battlefield, it pings somebody. So with those two, if you can get them both out, you're just slamming everybody down. They can't do anything about it. But those two are real carriers in this deck. Great way to deal direct damage, especially if someone is sort of turtling. Moving on to the instant speed spells, we're going to start out with Crop Rotation. At instant speed, you sacrifice a land and put another one into play. Now, this is not a basic land. This is another one that searches out any land you want it to be. So slam a Valakut down and get your 5/5 for it. Block with the 5/5. It's a good combat trick. Great card in this deck. Actually, this seems like a good card, period. It's got to be seeing play in Tron decks. Nature's Claim. With the prevalence of artifacts and enchantments, this card is just the most efficient way to remove them. Them gaining 4 life is no big deal. As you've seen, there's so many ways to go straight to the face in this deck. You're going to take that off in no time. Naturalize, costs 1 more, still destroys an artifact or enchantment, but they don't gain the life. Harrow, another instant speed trick to put extra creatures into play. You sack a land, you put 2 lands into play. Very simple, very green, very good card in this deck. Beast Within. Destroy target permanent, once again. Only cost 3 this time, but they do get a 3/3 beast creature token, no big deal. Momentous Fall. As an additional cost to play this, you sacrifice a creature. It's similar to the other one where you draw cards equal to its power, but you gain life equal to its toughness. And this one's at instant speed. Best target for this is Omnath. If you pump, not the general Omnath, but the Locus of Mana. You pump him up, get him to about 7 or 8, and then sacrifice him. Draw a bunch of cards, gain a bunch of life. And Comet Storm, one of the strongest red spells ever printed in my book. I love this thing. The multi-kicker being able to get another target for just 1 mana, it's fantastic because this is going to put out so much mana that there's no reason that this can't just go ahead and finish off a couple of people at once. Last but not least, every beatdown deck needs a good amount of creatures. This deck does not disappoint. Start out with our Veteran Explorer. This one's just a 1/1 for 1, but when it dies, each player can go ahead and grab 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield. Great late game, one of those ones you could play early on to ramp, play late game to generate extra tokens. Flamekin Harbinger. I did not even realize I had this card until I was just flipping through, and then I saw that it not only is it an elemental itself, but it also allows you to tutor up another elemental. That's the whole sort of kind of theme to this deck. This is not one of those ones where every creature is an elemental, as you saw from the first one, but a good majority of them will be. Dragon Master Outcast, another really efficient creature and a great way to just get extra tokens onto the battlefield, not to mention they're 5/5s and they're flying, always good. Sakura Tribe Elder. Anyone who plays green knows this card. Sack 'em, put a land into play at instant speed. The original Omnath from World Wake. Green mana doesn't empty from your mana pools. This is one that is almost always better to get early on and just start cranking mana into them as much as you can. But even still, if you get them late game and you have one of those card draw spells we mentioned earlier, this is a good way to use it. Or if you're late game and you're just out of options, just pump this guy until he's enormous and then go to town. Yavimaya Elder, another good way to get basics out of your library, and you can sacrifice him at any point to draw a card. He's a really good target for Pattern of Rebirth. You put it on him, you pay 2 to sacrifice it, you get a creature, you get 2 lands, and then you draw a card as well. Undergrowth Champion is one of the newer elementals, Battle for Zendikar. If damage would be dealt to him, you prevent it. And while he has a 1/1 counter on him, you prevent it and just remove a 1/1 counter from him. But whenever a land comes into play, you put a 1/1 counter on him. He's never gotten completely out of control so far. I actually don't think I've cast him in a game. But he is an elemental. He dies fairly easily, although he can get out of hand. This is one of the non-budget cards I decided to throw in here because if you've got it, you should run it in this deck. Play with the top card of your library revealed, play 2 lands per turn. That's simple. This card is incredible. When you cast this one, you feel good. Rakamar. Rakamar is when I saw this card in Conflux, I actually started playing in Shards of Alara. So Conflux was already out, but I looked up just to see what was in the rest of the block, and I saw this card, and I saw that it was dirt cheap. And I said, I like that card. That seems really good. Now, I wasn't very good at the game back then. The card's actually not super good, but in this deck, it really is. If you play it on turn 5, or I mean, probably earlier than that with the ramp spells, but if you play it when you've got 5 mana, you can immediately put a 3/1 red elemental creature token into play. They have haste, they get in there fast, but they're real delicate, so they die. If someone decides to block it, you can still lightning bolt them. It essentially gives them 6 power if something is blocking. Say you're attacking into a Sun Titan. The Sun Titan blocks, it takes 3 damage from the elemental, then you lightning bolt it with Omnath's ability, boom, dead Sun Titan, and it only costs you 1 red mana. Mina and Den, Wildborn. Another way to play an additional land. Not only that, but if you don't have lands in hand, you can use their ability to return one to your hand. This is one way to give Omnath Trample. It's one way to give the Locus of Mana. This is one way to give any other creature trample. You can do it multiple times if you just don't. If it's getting to be that time where you're just going in for an alpha strike, then use them. Acidic Slime, the Conley Woods card. Death Touch, 2/2 for 5. When it comes into play, destroy an artifact, creature, or land. I've never destroyed a land with it. I don't like land destruction, but if there's a problem land, I do. Other than that, it's a naturalize with a 2/2 Death Touch. Garrick's Pack Leader is another fantastic card in this deck. Land comes into play, generate your 5/5, draw a card. Really like this guy. He's not an elemental, but that's okay. He's still a 4/4 that has a lot of card advantage tied in. Skull Mulcher. He is an elemental. He's a 3/3 with Devour, another good way to get your Pattern of Rebirth into the graveyard. When he comes into play, you draw a card for each creature he devoured. He can get really big, especially if you have a lot of little snake tokens and little tiny elemental tokens, or you can just use him as a sack outlet to get a whole lot of damage in straight to somebody's face by sacking a lot of elementals. Ingot Chewer, he technically costs 5, but I usually end up casting him for 1 because he enters the battlefield, he's an elemental, and then he leaves the battlefield and deals 3 damage. Comes into play, destroys an artifact. You can cast him for 5, he's still a fine spell at that point. Oran Reef Hydra, again, not an elemental, but with the landfall, this guy can get really out of hand. He's already got trample by default, and he comes in as a 5/5 for 6. Every forest that comes into play, he gets 2 1/1 counters, and if it's just any other land, he gets an additional 1/1 counter as well. A good one to sacrifice to a momentous fall, or a good one to just beat face and end the game with eventually. Rampaging Baloths, 6/6 trample with landfall, putting a 4/4 beast into play. This one works real well with Garrick's Pack Hunter, especially if you've got Omnath and this in play. That means a land comes into play and you draw 2 cards. I never got a chance to run this in any deck efficiently, but he fits really, really well here. No elemental synergy, but token synergy galore. Vigor is another card that actually I did not realize until I looked him up how much he's gone up in value, but this guy is super good. You never have to attack with him to get tons of value out of him. If damage would be dealt to a creature other than Vigor, put a 1/1 counter on it for all the damage that would have been dealt and prevent all of that damage. So I don't understand how this card could have gotten printed and how this could be okay. If you do an Earthquake effect for 4, well, for 5 actually, you're going to hit everything for 5. Vigor's not going to die unless someone pings it for whatever reason. All of your elementals are going to take 5 damage, but that's going to be prevented, and now they're all going to be 10/10s. Just completely insane, and I see why this card is so expensive. The 2 Maze cards, Maze Behemoth, giving all of your multicolored creatures trample. Keep in mind your elemental tokens from Omnath are both red and green, so that will give them trample, and Omnath as well. And the Maze Rusher to give them all haste. Love this guy. Any way to give those creatures haste just ups their power level significantly. Dragon Broodmother, another card I've always liked but never had a chance to use really. Generates tokens for free, and generates tokens that can get pretty silly for free because they all have Devour 2. Then everyone knows the old Avenger of Zendikar. Not a lot of people paid attention to the fact that he is an elemental. Puts a ton of tokens into play, and those of course get bigger. I don't need to explain this card to you. Another elemental that I fit in here was Gaia's Revenge. Can't be targeted by non-green spells or abilities from non-green sources. This is fantastic. He can't be Path to Exiled. He can't be Swords to Plowshares. He can't be hit by a black spell unless it makes you sacrifice him. And he's got haste. He's an 8/5, plus he's the elemental, so even if he dies, he's still doing something. And the last card that we've got in the deck is the Liege of the Tangle. Now that's a lot of text down there, but what it says is he's an 8/8 for 8 with trample, and when he deals combat damage to a player, you can turn any number of your lands into 8/8 green elementals. They are still lands, but that just adds that little extra synergy there. If for whatever reason you turn all your lands into elementals and someone's sitting there holding a Wrath of God, that person knows that they're going to destroy all your lands, and all of those elementals are going to hit them in the face for 3 apiece. This guy fits perfectly in this deck, and I've been waiting to use him. I love the art. He looks so cool. But as I said, that's the last card of the deck. Let's just wind up with some closing thoughts. So a couple of closing thoughts. I know a lot of y'all have been watching this video thinking that you can name 20 cards at least that I should have in here, but like I said, kind of a budget deck. There are plenty of cards that you could put in there to put the power level even further off the charts. I'll go through just a couple of really, really good ones here. First is Azusa, Lust but Seeking, to just a creature that allows you to play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. Completely filthy, but also comes with a price tag of about 27 for 1 card. That's really high up there for me to just buy 1 for a deck that I'm just playing casually. Fertilid is not expensive. In fact, you could probably get 1 for a dime. It's an elemental, and it's got 2 rampant growths when it comes into play. If you can find a way to put extra 1/1 counters, it's even more. I kind of like it. I might try it. I've got a couple of them lying around somewhere. Exploration is another one of the ones with the higher cost. It's about 12 or 13 bucks right now as I'm recording this. It allows you to play another land on your turns. It's an enchantment. It's a global enchantment. Stays in play. So I might get that at some point. We'll see. Parallel Lives, and if I'm not mistaken, I do believe Doubling Season does the same thing as well, sort of, kind of. If an effect would put one or more tokens onto the battlefield under your control, it puts twice that many tokens down there instead. That's that's really good, but again, it's gonna run you close to 10 bucks to get that card. And yes, Doubling Season does double your tokens, but that one's 60, so it's even further out of my price range right now. Both of those would make this completely insane, though. If you've got one of those in play, you play your Omnath, you're now putting 10 power and toughness, or if you've got both of them in play, you're putting, I think, what is it? Are you doubling it twice so it goes from 5 to 10 then to 20, so you're putting 4 of them each land that comes in? Yeah, that's just insane. Titania, Protector of Argoth. I really like this card. She's a 5/3 elemental, so she's not super strong. She brings a land from your graveyard back into play, and whenever a land is put into the graveyard from play, you put a 5/3 green elemental creature token. This one works super well with the Liege of the Tangle. In fact, I might have to get her specifically because I like the way the Liege of the Tangle works. You put a bunch of lands, you make a bunch of lands into elementals, and then if for whatever reason they were to die, she allows you to bring them back to an extent. But actually, I mean, just the fact that those lands die, they become 5/3 elementals, so they've got to deal with even more elementals again. I kind of like that. I might have to look into it. Planeswalkers, I didn't think Garrick fit this all that well, although he does put a 3/3 in play, which triggers Garrick's pack leader. Yes, I understand that, but I've got enough ramp that he just doesn't fit it that much, and the overrun ability is good. No reason for it, though. I mean, I've got the Infect overrun because when people have 40 life, the Infect overrun is probably going to kill them a little bit easier. But, I mean, all your creatures are going to be huge. They're already 5/5s. Do you really need them to be 8/8s? So yeah, the Planeswalkers, I like Nissas. Both of the Nissas are good. The Sage Animist creates 4/4 elementals, and the Vital Force turns your land into a 5/5 elemental. The Ultimates, notwithstanding, I mean, they're good because of that. But one of them says whenever a land enters the battlefield you control, you can draw a card. Now you've already got effects that are allowing you to do that as is. Vital Force allows you to do it again. Um, the Ultimate on the Animist says untap up to 6 target lands, they become 6/6 elementals, and they're still lands, and that's a permanent effect. So, I mean, they're both pretty good. They both got their use, and I can see if you have them, there's no reason not to run them. I don't particularly have them, and I don't know. I may find a way to fit them in here at some point. Eternal Witness, the obvious, you need a little bit of graveyard recursion just in case someone kills something, but there's nothing of dire importance in this deck that I really need to Eternal Witness back right now. If I were to put in something like a Doubling Season one day when I finally save up for another one, maybe, but as is, she doesn't really need to be in here for me. Bane of Progress, 2/2 elemental, costs 4 green. When it enters the battlefield, destroy all artifacts and enchantments and put a 1/1 counter on it for each permanent destroyed this way. Probably one of those ones that you don't want to just ramp into as fast as possible. There's a really good chance you're going to have a really good artifact and enchantment in play. This is sort of like an oh crap card that you want to play and destroy everybody's stuff and maybe set everybody back to the Stone Age. And God forbid someone's playing an all artifact like an Esper deck of some kind. You're just going to completely wipe them out. They're not going to like you at all. But he is an elemental, and I can see why you'd want to run him. Stalking Vengeance is not an elemental. He's a 5/5 avatar for 5 red. But he's a 5/5 with haste, and whenever another creature dies, another creature you control dies, it deals damage equal to its power to target player. I really like this guy, and I might have to pick him up as well. I've got to figure out where some of these things are going to go, though. But you can use Ashnod's Altar to sacrifice them, and then go 5 to the face. So they come into play and deal 5 with one of your enchantments, and then they leave play and deal 5 because of Stalking Vengeance. It turns this almost into a burn deck. Plus, the art on Stalking Vengeance is really cool. If you've never seen it, go look it up. Malignus, he's kind of scary. He's also an elemental, 3 red. His power and toughness are each equal to half of the highest life total among your opponents rounded up. So, in EDH, on turn 3 or 4, or I should say turn 4 or 5 when you're playing him, there's a good chance he's going to be like a 1919 or maybe even a 2020. So, and you can't prevent the damage dealt by him. So fog doesn't work. Not that anybody runs him, but if you can give him trample, you're just getting in there. You can take someone out and then start wheedling down someone else's life as well. And the last one I'm going to mention is one that I think I've got lying around somewhere, and I need to try and test it out. Anger. It's a 2/2 with haste for 4, but if it's in your graveyard and you have a mountain, which you will, all of your creatures have haste. It's kind of like a little mini fires that you have a Maya. So those are just some ideas of things you can do with the deck. I mean, there's an infinite way, an infinite number of combinations of cards that you can put that are both red and green. That was my build, and just tinker around with it, see what you like. Anywho, hope you enjoyed, and come back for more.